Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I'd like to remind you, each and every day expands our base. The issue in this campaign should be the candidates and their positions on issues. Instead, in 2024, we are dealing with the issue of Joe Biden and his health, and Donald Trump, who is a convicted felon. It is a tragic moment for American politics, but I want, if I can, to reflect with you on the only analogy with Joe Biden that I have in my memory of political events. It goes back to 1919. The President of the United States was Woodrow Wilson. He suffered a minor stroke while traveling, defending his concept of the League of Nations, and then a major stroke in the White House in 1919. And for about a year and a half, the United States did not have an active president. Now, remember, 1919, the year after the First World War, international relations were not nearly as tense as they had been, and we were able to limp along, in large measure because of the president's wife, Edith Bowling Galt Wilson. She protected her husband. In fact, some people in that era called it government by petticoat, because she really ran things. She made clear that the president made all the decisions. The only thing that she did was to present the issues to him. Well, that pretty much summed it up. When Senator Albert Fall, who was ultimately to be in Warren Harding's cabinet as Secretary of the Interior, and actually not a particularly honest man, came to see Wilson at the White House with a group of legislators, they had him, that is, the White House people had him propped up on a chaise lounge. And Senator Fall, who hated Wilson, and Wilson hated Fall, Senator Fall looked down at President Wilson and said, "We're praying for you, Mr. President." And Wilson looked right back at him and said, "Which way, Senator? Which way?" Now, we're not in that extreme position today, but we know that things are growing more tense. Nancy Pelosi refused to give a full-throated, unequivocal endorsement to the idea of Joe Biden serving another term as president. Everyone knows that George Clooney, a Hollywood personality, but also a major contributor to the Democratic Party and a stalwart in terms of raising money for Joe Biden, has now said it's time for Joe to go. We know that now that the NATO conference is over, that there will be more and more Democrats who will stand up and say it's time for Joe to go. By the way, reminds me of when Leonid Brezhnev visited Richard Nixon in 1973. Brezhnev went to San Clemente, and you will recall that all of a sudden everybody was very quiet about Richard Nixon and his resignation because there was a feeling that we did not want to interfere in the making of foreign policy. As soon as Brezhnev left, the dam burst, and we all know the result there. The NATO summit is now over. Joe Biden did a good job of presenting the case for NATO and for Ukraine. But now the real question will be tonight, the press conference. How will he do? And even if he does exceptionally well, will it reduce the feelings that Joe Biden is simply not up to another 4 years as president? I believe the answer is no. Now, let's be blunt. Joe Biden has the votes. If he doesn't withdraw, he will be the Democratic nominee. What does that mean for the Democratic Party? That's the question. And Joe Biden needs to think about it. After all, he ran for president to prevent Donald Trump from being reelected, and he succeeded. Will he run for reelection and thereby ensure the election of Donald Trump? That must be the primary thought that Joe Biden and his advisors will have. This is a serious question because for half of the country, preventing Donald Trump from becoming president is the critical issue, pure and simple. But we know that Donald Trump faces his own problems. The Republican Party is about to nominate a convicted felon, 34 times convicted, a man who has been convicted of sexual impropriety, a man who faces charges, if it ever goes to court, about what happened on January 6th, a man who, having surrounded himself with people from the Heritage Foundation, and indeed accepting Heritage Foundation recommendations for people to sit on the Supreme Court, now claims he knows nothing about Project 2025. Impossible. It's been in the news. The people who wrote the project are people who all work for Donald Trump. Does anybody believe that Donald Trump is not aware of these things? Donald Trump, frankly, doesn't tell the truth. We know it because during the joint appearance last week, we saw Donald Trump at least 30 times not tell the truth. And those of us who remember the old Pinocchio rating from the Washington Post know that his inability to tell the truth is standard fare for Donald Trump. So what do we do? It's a good question. The Democrats are going to try to resolve the question in the next few weeks. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be painful. Let us all be aware that the one good that has come out of this is the recognition by virtually all Democrats that Joe Biden has been an excellent president. That's the Democratic platform. When you boil it all down, no matter what the words are, whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be running on Joe Biden's record. And that's why I will again say, if Biden is not the nominee, Kamala Harris will be. What about Donald Trump? What about the Republicans who are about to convene in convention? What will their stands be? Not just in their platform, because we now know that the proposed platform is simply a reflection of Donald Trump. But what are they going to say about Donald Trump? That's the question. And of course, we know now that a number of the delegates who will be attending the Republican National Convention were people who were involved in the fake electors scheme. People who were told they could never participate in the Electoral College again. Well, they're not participating in that electors situation, but they will be delegates to the Republican National Convention. And who are the people at the convention in terms of their positions and their stands? It is a clear choice for the American people, but a choice filled with ambiguity. Is Donald Trump fit to be president? Well, the same question has to be asked of Joe Biden. Frankly, it's going to be a fascinating few weeks. We're going to see Democrats and Republicans dealing with tough issues, but more important, the issues surrounding their personality in terms of candidates. We have a long way to go in this campaign, and as a political junkie, I can tell you, I wake up every morning intrigued. What shoe will drop next? We all wait with anxious anticipation. But we now know it's not just the American people who are waiting. The world is waiting. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, your feedback is critical. Thank you all for your comments on Facebook and LinkedIn. But more than that, I want to thank Gogo Zoger. She is the producer of this podcast, and Around the Political World with John Rothman is as much a product of her effort as mine. Well, that's it for today. I can't wait to come back tomorrow because we're going to have a lot to talk about, aren't we?